Welcome back. We've got a bit of an impromptu rectangular table this time. I decided to mash together my hockey content with my rectangular table discussion content. I had Eric watch Goon for the very first time, a very popular hockey movie, and we're going to talk about it now. First and foremost, what did you think of the movie?
Well, it kind of reminded me of Waterboy, but for hockey, but I wasn't expecting it to be so dark. Like, it was kind of more depressing than anything else. Everybody seemed miserable in it. People like that are not very pleasant to hang out with in real life. I have never been that much of a sports person, and this kind of reinforces that.
Well, so overall, did you find the movie
The movie
entertaining?
was entertaining, yeah.
I mean, I definitely think you thought it was pretty funny. Did you have a favorite character, or what was your favorite part of the movie?
I don't know. Like everybody just seemed kind of kooky or just obnoxious. There weren't really that. I mean, like the Stifler is kind of like the likable because he's not a jerk, but it's kind of depressing that he's like as dumb as he is.
I think the point of it was essentially basically throw a bunch of hockey stereotypes or kind of hockey guy stereotypes into the same movie. And I think they kind of hyperbolize the hockey stereotypes in a way. What I like about Goon compared to some of my other favorite hockey movies, like say The Mighty Ducks, like I think the hockey is a little bit more realistic in this than it is in Mighty Ducks. Like Mighty Ducks has gimmicky stuff like the flying V, which would probably be illegal considering they enter the zone offsides and they commit interference. I like how in Goon the stuff that happens on screen is a little bit more realistic. Some of the calls and non-calls are a little bit unrealistic, but as far as the actual gameplay, it is more realistic to real life. Where would you rank this movie in terms of like other hockey movies you've seen? Like, what are some of the other movies that you might like better or worse, and what makes you like them more or less?
I mean, the Mighty Ducks movies are like entertaining as kids movies. I mean, Miracle on Ice was more. This is definitely less like uplifting of a movie than most like sports movies are. I can't even really think of like sports based. Most of the sports movies I've ever watched in my life are like kids movies.
I almost think this is like the Deadpool of sports movies, where it's very graphic and there's a lot of suggestive language and violence, and they don't really go out of their way to try to make it watered down and politically correct. It's kind of the complete opposite. I think that's what a lot of degenerate hockey people or hockey fans like about it. They don't really try to go for any kind of narrative, or they don't really have an agenda. I think it's just Jay Baruchel's take on like what hockey guys are really like, or like what hockey teams are kind of like. Some of that hazing that Belchior was getting in the locker room, and a lot of the stuff that was happening in the locker room, it was subtle nuances that you see in a real hockey locker room, and not necessarily to that drastic of an extent, but that's kind of a lot of what you see in a hockey locker room. As somebody that's been in hockey locker rooms my whole life, that's something that I thought they did well. I thought they accurately reflected how hockey players act around each other, how they act maybe a little bit differently when they're around their significant other. And I think they just did a good job of capturing like all the different kind of, I mean, I said stereotypes a lot, but that's kind of how it is. There's a few different stereotypes that you run into in the hockey community, and I think they kind of added a little bit of every stereotype that you might find on the Halifax Highlanders.
Yeah, I try not to get myself into like the overly obnoxious, overly broy situations like that.
Did you like the movie more than you thought you were going to going in?
I probably assumed it was gonna be like goofier. I didn't really know what to expect. It's not like a movie I would have probably watched on my own.
I think that's why it's a good one to do a rectangular table on it, even if it's not as long as some of our other ones, because it gives a perspective of a hockey movie. Like, all I've really gotten opinions on this movie is other, like, quote unquote, hockey people. So it's interesting to get your perspective because you're not necessarily a hockey fan or somebody that plays hockey. So it's interesting to see like what you think about it and what you took away from it.
I've watched like NHL games on TV though, and like the NHL's. I remember like watching Vipers games, and there'd be a lot of fighting in that. And I don't think I probably zoned out and didn't really pay much attention to the whole game. But like watching NHL games on TV feels a lot more polished than this too.
Yeah, this is definitely an over dramatization, and I think they wanted to focus more on the enforcer aspect of the game. The other thing that I thought they kind of nailed was the mutual respect that the enforcer and each team has with the other one. They kind of understand what the other one is there to do because that's their role. They showed that subtly how Ross, in the penalty box, he tapped the glass and was like, "Are you ready?" Like, that's common in AHL, East Coast League, NHL, where the enforcer will make sure the other one's ready to go. And that's often a sort of rite of passage. A veteran enforcer will try to give fights to the young up-and-comers so that they have the chance to prove themselves. Whether they win or not, I mean, if the veteran guy gets beat, then that makes the younger guy look good, and the veteran guy is still a veteran, so it's not like they're going to get cut or anything like that. And then if they don't win, then it's like, all right, well, they still got their name out there. It shows that that young and up-and-comer is willing to go after the champ, so to speak. And so I think they kind of nailed that subtle aspect of it as well, which I thought was a nice touch.
Yeah, Liv Schreiber plays a pretty good villain character in a lot of things, and it kind of sets him up to make him seem like he's this big sociopath, but he's kind of like, when you like hear him talk, he kind of comes across more honorable and like less of a sociopath than even like the people on Stifler's team.
And that's another thing that I think they kind of nailed is like the player on each team that is sort of the enforcer or the guy that's sort of the protector, more often than not, off the ice, they're the best guys. They're the best guys that you'd want to get a beer with, or they're the guys that you'd want to hang out with, and they're guys that you would just be friends with as an average citizen. When they're on the ice, they're there to do their job, and they're there to fight or do whatever, or hit or just protect somebody. But when you're off the ice, they're just like a regular guy, and they're usually the best guy that you'd want to hang out with and the guy that you want in your life. I think they kind of nailed that too. I mean, the fact that Ross Ray kind of had dinner with him before and was talking to him about it, like, look, like, I'm a veteran, I'm on my way out, you're on your way up, people are writing about this, we got to make this happen, we got to make it look good. I think that's a common thing that happens. I think the enforcers, whether they're on opposite teams or not, I really think they do hang out. And I think most of them are good friends off the ice. I think that's a subtle thing that they nailed as well.
In wrestling, a lot of the wrestlers that play bad guys are actually like the nicest people in real life. Like, apparently Hulk Hogan is kind of a jerk in real life, but like Triple H is a real nice guy in real life.
Another example would be like Chris Jericho, too, how he's kind of a asshole character most of the time, but he's one of the coolest guys. Edge, too, seems like one of the coolest guys.
Supposed to be real nice in real life, yeah. Well, and like the good guys that are jerks, like The Rock was like a jerk character, but he's super nice in real life. And like Stone Cold is supposed to be super nice in real life, but he was like a jerk.
I actually think it's easier to play your foil in, whether it's WWE or in like movies and stuff.
Probably.
And in a lot of cases, everybody in the hockey community, for the most part, are good guys. Like, you don't really find too many assholes in the hockey community. I kind of find most people that play hockey are, for the most part, cool. Or, like, you can have common ground with them in some degree. But they also kind of nailed that, like how Xavier Laflamme was the star player, and he was kind of the one that was sort of the asshole. I think that's kind of common on hockey teams where the star of the team can almost be jaded by it all because there's so much pressure and so much expectation. I think you can see that a lot where they'll turn to substance abuse or other things to kind of cope with the anxiety. And also in his case, I think it subtly made a nod to the dangers of getting addicted to prescription drugs. They didn't really go so much into it as far as the enforcers aspect, but that's a major problem that enforcers have, is that they suffer from depression and anxiety because they probably don't sleep very well, and so they're reliant on taking Percocets and stuff like that to get to sleep because they're anxious, because they know that the next game they have to have energy and they have to fight. And when they know going in that they're going to fight and that's the only reason that they're going to be there and that they have to win, that makes them super anxious and nervous. And I mean, if they're not 100%, I mean, if they're at 60, 70% because they're banged up, they got bruises and stuff, stitches, whatever, then they're taking painkillers and Percocet. And so it's a constant vicious cycle of them taking all these painkillers and sleeping pills, and it's a real issue.
It's the same with like rock stars and probably really any kind of celebrity.
So I know it's kind of exaggerated in a lot of regards, but I think this movie nails a lot of the subtle things that don't necessarily get talked about a ton in the hockey community. It's stuff that I've learned from listening to interviews or whatever, hearing former players. There's a documentary called Ice Gladiators, which is real life enforcers, whether they're in the coast or the A or even the NHL. They talk about some of their struggles, and they talk about kind of that sort of unwritten code amongst enforcers where there's certain things you do and certain things you don't do.
A lot of these people probably like grew up in rough situations too, and this is like how they kind of are directionless and that like need something to take their aggression out, like. Because isn't, like, hockey especially, it's kind of expensive to, like, you kind of have to play travel league and, like, have to pay to play, like, get into the elite, like, scouted leagues to, like, work your way up into the professional level where you're then, like, making millions and, like, have kind of a safety net for yourself.
I think that's something that fans like about hockey, too, is there is an aspect of fighting built into the restraints of the game. It's something that gives a guy that's not necessarily skilled or the greatest skater a chance to play hockey, because teams probably need somebody like that to protect the star players. Being an enforcer or a fighter or just a guy that's there to dissuade other teams from being dirty to the star players, that gives an opportunity to somebody that might not have otherwise had it.
In D&D, they'd be the tank.
Did you have any other final thoughts or any other comments you wanted to make about the movie? Are you interested in seeing the second one? What are you maybe expecting of the second one before you watch it?
I mean, upon looking at the sentence log preview, it would seem like Stifler is at a crossroads where, like, he might become the old captain guy who's like divorced and can't see his kids. And it's like, if you get injured and can no longer play, what are you gonna do with yourself? Like, your options are very kneecapped. Like, the longer you're in, too.
Overall, what would you give this movie out of 10 and why?
I'll say like 7. It's not like the type of thing I would normally watch. I mean, I guess it's like cool for a sports movie.
Were you overall pleasantly surprised by this movie?
I wouldn't say I liked or disliked it more than I was expecting.